The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of our Upper East Side townhouse. The sound cut through the Christmas carols playing softly in the background, silencing every conversation in the room. My husband Tom stood in the doorway, his arm wrapped around a woman young enough to be his daughter, her red dress clinging to her body like a second skin. She wore the diamond bracelet I'd admired in Tiffany's window last month, the one Tom said was too expensive. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Tom announced, his voice carrying that practiced confidence that had once made me feel safe. "This is Sophie. She's joining us for dinner." My mother-in-law's fork clattered onto her plate. My sister's mouth hung open. Tom's business partner, Richard, coughed into his napkin. But Tom just smiled. That charming smile that had won me over 20 years ago when we were both starting out in Manhattan, two ambitious kids from nowhere trying to make something of themselves. "Tom," I managed to whisper, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "What are you doing?" He laughed, actually laughed, pulling Sophie closer. "Come on, Clara. Lighten up. You don't know how to have fun anymore. You only live once, right?" The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the dining table, my knuckles white against the lace tablecloth my grandmother had given us as a wedding present. 20 years of marriage, of building a life together, of supporting his career while sacrificing my own dreams. And this was how it ended. In front of our families, our friends, on Christmas Day? But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got here, how a woman who once believed in fairy tales ended up starring in a nightmare, we need to go back 3 months. 3 months earlier, I was living what I thought was a charmed life. Our townhouse on East 73rd Street was a testament to Tom's success as a commercial real estate developer. The rooms were filled with carefully curated art, furniture that cost more than most people's cars, and photos of us at charity galas, vacation homes in the Hamptons, ski trips to Aspen. I worked as a senior editor at Preston Publishing, one of the last independent houses in Manhattan, a job I loved despite the modest salary. Tom always said we didn't need my income, but I couldn't imagine giving up my career. Books were my passion, my refuge, my own small corner of accomplishment in a life that often felt like it belonged to someone else. That Tuesday in September started like any other. I woke at 6, made Tom's coffee exactly how he liked it, strong with a splash of cream, listened to him complain about a difficult client while I mentally reviewed the manuscript I needed to finish before our editorial meeting. He kissed my cheek on his way out, leaving behind the scent of his expensive cologne, and I felt that familiar flutter of gratitude. I was lucky, I told myself. So many of my friends were divorced, struggling, or stuck in loveless marriages. Tom and I were solid. The first crack appeared that afternoon. I'd left work early with a migraine, something that had been happening more frequently lately. My doctor had suggested stress, maybe hormonal changes, but I suspected it was something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. The subway ride home had been disorienting, the lights too bright, the sounds too loud. I'd pressed my forehead against the cool window, trying to will away the pounding in my skull. A young couple sat across from me, holding hands, whispering to each other with that intimacy that only new love brings. I watched them with something that felt like grief, remembering when Tom and I had been like that. When had we stopped holding hands on the subway? When had we stopped whispering secrets to each other? The doorman, Carlos, had looked concerned when I stumbled through the lobby. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right? Should I call someone?" "Just a headache, Carlos. I'll be fine." But even to my own ears, my voice sounded thin, unconvincing. The apartment was quiet when I got home. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of Manhattan traffic filtering through the windows. I dropped my briefcase by the door, kicked off my heels, and stood in the foyer for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. Our home was beautiful, magazine-worthy, but it felt empty somehow, like a stage set waiting for actors to bring it to life. I was heading to the bedroom, planning to lie down with a cold compress when I heard Tom's voice coming from his study. I can't wait to see you either, baby. Tonight's going to be special. I froze in the hallway. The tenderness in his voice, that intimate warmth, it was a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years. My heart started hammering against my ribs, each beat painful and sharp. I stood there, one hand pressed against the wall for balance, my briefcase still hanging from my shoulder, feeling the world tilt on its axis. I know. I hate lying to her too, but it won't be much longer. Just be patient with me. The metallic taste of shock filled my mouth. I backed away slowly, my mind racing through 1,000 explanations. It could be about business. Maybe he was planning a surprise for our anniversary next month. Maybe he was talking to his sister about their mother's birthday gift. Maybe. But even as I constructed these elaborate justifications, some deeper part of me knew. The way he'd been distant lately, the unexplained absences, the new attention to his appearance. I'd noticed all of it, filed it away in some mental drawer I'd refused to open. Now that drawer was spilling open, and I couldn't shove the contents back in. I retreated to the bedroom and closed the door quietly, my hands shaking as I sat on the edge of our bed. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. This was our sanctuary, the place where we'd shared 20 years of intimacy, of whispered conversations in the dark, of comfort and connection. Or had we? When was the last time Tom had really looked at me, really seen me? When was the last time we'd made love without him checking his phone afterward? When was the last time he'd asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? The migraine that had been a dull throb now exploded behind my eyes with full force. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light filtering through the curtains. These were Tom's curtains, Tom's choice. The beige walls were his preference. The furniture arrangement suited his needs. When had I stopped having opinions about my own home? You're imagining things, I told myself. You're stressed from work. That manuscript about the cheating husband is getting into your head. Don't be paranoid. Don't be that wife. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. When Tom came to bed that night, he found me pretending to read. He kissed the top of my head absently, already scrolling through his phone. You okay? You seem quiet. This was my moment. I could ask him directly, confront what I'd heard. But fear paralyzed me. Fear of the answer, fear of being wrong, fear of being right. What if he confessed? What if he lied? What if this conversation was the one that ended everything? I wasn't ready. I needed time to prepare, to understand, to gather myself for whatever was coming. So I swallowed the words like bitter medicine and said, "Just tired, long day." "Get some rest," he murmured, his attention already elsewhere. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow." I lay awake long after his breathing deepened into sleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering when I'd become the kind of woman who was afraid to ask her own husband a simple question. The bedroom felt claustrophobic, the darkness pressing down like a weight on my chest. Outside, the city that never sleeps hummed with life. Cars honking on the avenue, sirens wailing in the distance, the endless pulse of Manhattan. But I'd never felt more alone, more isolated, more trapped in a life that suddenly felt like a beautifully decorated cage. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in self-doubt. I found myself analyzing every word Tom said, every late night at the office, every business dinner. I started paying attention to things I'd previously overlooked. The way he angled his phone away when texting, the new cologne, the gym membership he'd suddenly started using religiously, the weight loss, the updated wardrobe. I began cataloging the changes, keeping a mental inventory of evidence. Tuesday, home at 11, said he was with clients. Wednesday, new shirt, expensive, not from any store I recognized. Thursday, caught him smiling at his phone, quickly put it away when I entered the room. Friday, canceled our dinner plans last minute, urgent work emergency. Each observation was like a tiny cut, small enough to dismiss individually, but collectively They were bleeding me dry. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake counting the hours until Tom came home, straining to hear if he was on his phone in the bathroom, analyzing his mood for clues about where he'd really been. I know what you're thinking right now, listening to this. You're screaming at your screen, telling me to wake up, to open my eyes. But here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets and flashing lights. It creeps in slowly, disguising itself as personal growth, as renewed energy, as harmless changes. And when you love someone, when you've built your entire adult life around them, you don't want to see it. Your mind becomes an expert at explaining away the obvious, at manufacturing innocence where none exists. The second clue came in mid-October. I was looking for Tom's insurance card in his desk drawer, something he'd asked me to find before his dentist appointment when I saw the email notification on his laptop screen. He'd left it open, something he never did. The preview was enough to stop my heart. Reservation confirmed. The Plaza Hotel, October 18th, King Suite with city view. October 18th was a Wednesday. Not our anniversary, not his birthday, not any special occasion I could think of. And the Plaza? We'd stayed there on our wedding night 20 years ago, when it still felt like a fairy tale. We'd barely been able to afford it then, scraping together our meager savings for one night of luxury. We'd ordered room service champagne and made love on the fancy linens and promised each other that someday, when we made it, we'd go back and do it properly. Was he taking her to our place? To the hotel that held our memories? I stood there in his study, the insurance card forgotten in my hand, feeling the floor shift beneath my feet. The afternoon light streaming through the window seemed too bright, too ordinary for this moment of devastating clarity. I could hear Mrs. Chen watering her plants on the balcony next door, could smell coffee brewing in someone's apartment, could hear the doorman greeting a delivery person down on the street. Life was going on, normal and unchanged, while mine was quietly imploding. My hands moved almost without conscious thought. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, my fingers surprisingly steady. Evidence. I was gathering evidence. When had I become the kind of woman who needed evidence of her husband's fidelity? That night, I confronted him. Not with accusations, I wasn't brave enough for that yet, but with careful questions. We were sitting at the dining table, picking at the meal I'd prepared, when I forced myself to speak. "Tom, are you happy? In our marriage, I mean." He looked up from his dinner, genuinely puzzled. "What kind of question is that? Of course I'm happy. Why would you even ask?" "I don't know. You've seemed distant lately, distracted." His expression shifted into something between annoyance and concern. "Clara, I've got 3 major deals closing this quarter. I'm under a lot of pressure. You know this." He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch familiar yet foreign. His fingers were cool, his grip perfunctory. "You're not having some kind of midlife crisis, are you? You've been reading too many of those novels at work." And just like that, he flipped it. Suddenly, I was the one with the problem. I was being emotional, irrational, needy. I was the one who needed to examine her behavior, her insecurities, her paranoia. This was gaslighting in its purest form, and I was falling for it. "Maybe you're right," I heard myself say. "I'm sorry. I'm probably just stressed." He smiled, relieved. "That's my girl. Tell you what, why don't you book yourself a spa day this weekend? Use my card, get a massage, a facial, whatever you want. You deserve it." A spa day. That was his solution. As if a cucumber eye treatment could fix the growing chasm I felt opening between us. But I smiled back, played the grateful wife, and let him think the matter was settled. Have you ever doubted your own sanity? Have you ever been so thoroughly convinced that you were wrong, that your instincts were lying to you, that you started to question your own perception of reality? That's gaslighting. Not the dramatic version you see in movies, but the subtle, insidious kind that makes you feel crazy for trusting your gut. And I was drowning in it. But that reservation email lingered in my mind like a splinter I couldn't remove. October 18th came and went. Tom said he was having dinner with potential investors. He came home at 2 a.m, smelling of expensive scotch and unfamiliar perfume. When I asked how dinner went, he launched into a detailed story about difficult negotiations, market conditions, and zoning regulations. The details were so specific, so plausible, that I almost believed him. Almost. 2 days later, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my college friend Lisa, who worked in tech consulting and knew things about digital surveillance that probably weren't entirely legal. We met for lunch at a small bistro in the West Village, far from my usual haunts. The restaurant was one of those hidden gems that tourists never find, tucked down a narrow street with checkered tablecloths and a menu written in chalk. I arrived first, ordered a glass of wine I had no intention of drinking, and rehearsed what I was going to say. How do you tell someone that you're spying on your husband? How do you admit that your perfect marriage might be a fraud? Lisa swept in 15 minutes late, all kinetic energy and warm hugs, smelling of expensive perfume and possibility. She'd done well in tech, much better than most of us from our state school cohort. She wore success easily, casually, in a way I'd never quite managed. Sorry, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Client call ran long. God, it's good to see you. It's been too long. Her eyes narrowed as she really looked at me. Clara, what's wrong? You look terrible, no offense. I need your help, I told her, my voice barely above a whisper. And I need you not to judge me. Lisa's expression shifted from concern to laser focus. She leaned forward, took my hand. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the phone call, about the hotel reservation, about the growing distance, and the way Tom made me feel crazy for noticing. I told her about lying awake at night, about the constant anxiety, about feeling like I was losing my mind. And as I talked, I watched her face harden with anger on my behalf. Honey, she said when I finally ran out of words, your gut is trying to tell you something. Listen to it. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to send you some links, apps that can track location, recover deleted messages, monitor activity. But Clara, be careful. If you go down this road, you need to be ready for what you might find. Are you sure you want to know? I thought about it, really thought about it. I could walk away from this conversation, go home, continue living in blissful ignorance. I could choose to believe Tom's explanations, to trust in the life we'd built. But even as I considered it, I knew I'd already crossed a line. The doubt had taken root, and it would only grow until I either proved it wrong or confirmed my worst fears. I need to know the truth. Then let's find it. The next week was a crash course in espionage. Lisa walked me through everything, patiently explaining how to access phone records, how to install monitoring software, how to recover deleted messages. She taught me about cloud backups, location tracking, hidden apps. I learned how to check browsing history, how to find cached images, how to trace credit card statements. I felt like a character in one of the thrillers we published at work, except this was my life, my marriage, my reality being dissected and examined under a microscope. Each new skill felt like a betrayal of the woman I used to be, the one who trusted, who believed, who didn't need to verify her husband's faithfulness. The learning curve was steep, but fear is a powerful motivator. I practiced on my own phone first, learning the interfaces, understanding how the apps worked. Lisa set me up with encrypted cloud storage, showed me how to hide the evidence I was gathering. She taught me about digital footprints, about covering my tracks, about maintaining plausible deniability. You're a natural, she said one evening as we sat in her apartment, my laptop open between us. You should have gone into investigation instead of publishing. I never thought I'd need these skills, I said quietly. I thought we were happy. Lisa squeezed my shoulder. Maybe you were, but happiness built on lies isn't real, Clara. It's just a comfortable delusion. The close call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was in Tom's study, his phone connected to my laptop, downloading messages, when I heard his key in the lock. He was home 3 hours early. My heart stopped. I yanked the cable, shoved the laptop under a pile of magazines on the credenza, and grabbed the nearest book, pretending to be absorbed in reading. "Clara, what are you doing in here?" I looked up, forcing my expression into casual innocence, my heart hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. "Oh, hi, honey. I was looking for that book on Italian architecture you bought last year. Thought it might help with the Moretti manuscript I'm working on." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. I held my breath. Certain he could hear my heart pounding, could see the guilt written across my features. The silence stretched between us, heavy and dangerous. I could see him processing, calculating, deciding whether to believe me. Then he shrugged. "I think it's in the living room bookcase. Listen, I need to grab some files and head back out. Emergency meeting. On a Thursday night. Welcome to commercial real estate." He kissed my forehead, gathered some papers from his desk, and was gone before I could say another word. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close before I let myself collapse into his desk chair, my whole body shaking. That was too close. But I couldn't stop now. I was in too deep, and the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. The smoking gun arrived on a cold November morning. I was scrolling through the recovered messages on my laptop when I found them. Dozens of texts between Tom and someone named Sophie. The early ones were flirtatious but deniable. Compliments that could be interpreted as friendly. Emoji that were borderline inappropriate but not definitive. But as I scrolled through the timeline, watching their relationship develop in real time, the messages escalated. By July, they'd moved past deniable into explicitly sexual territory. By August, they were talking about a future together. I sat there reading my husband's betrayal, watching him fall in love with someone else in carefully crafted texts, watching him complain about me, about our marriage, about how I held him back. "Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Soon, baby. I promise. Just need to handle things carefully. You're worth the wait. I love you. I love you too. You've made me feel alive again." The words blurred on the screen as tears filled my eyes. 20 years of marriage, reduced to an obstacle to be handled carefully. I was a problem to be managed, a complication in their love story. The nausea hit me in waves, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick. I sat on the cold tile floor, my back against the bathtub, and let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the humiliation, the rage, the grief. Our entire marriage had been a lie, or at least the last few months of it. Maybe longer. How long had he been unhappy? How long had he been looking elsewhere for whatever I wasn't providing? I cried until I had no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I cried for the girl who'd married Tom, believing in forever, for the woman who'd sacrificed her ambitions for his career, for all the years I'd spent making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I cried for my grandmother's bracelet on another woman's wrist, for the hotel suite that held our memories being used to create new ones with someone else, for every lie and every moment of gaslighting that had made me doubt my own sanity. But then, as I sat there on that bathroom floor, something shifted. The tears stopped, the shaking subsided. A cold, crystalline clarity settled over me, hard and sharp as winter ice. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead or bargain or try to win him back. I was going to make him pay. A betrayal this deep doesn't heal. It scars over. And my scar tissue was forming into armor. I pulled myself up, washed my face, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, but behind the tears was something new. Something dangerous. Tom had spent 20 years thinking he knew me, thinking I was safe, predictable, manageable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The photographs were the final piece. I found them on a hidden Instagram account. Tom and Sophie wrapped around each other at a beach somewhere tropical. Her head on his shoulder at a restaurant I recognized from Brooklyn. His arm around her waist at what looked like a gallery opening. They looked happy, in love. The way we used to look in our old photos, before life became about maintaining appearances and attending the right parties and saying the right things to the right people. In one photo, she was wearing my grandmother's bracelet. Not the Tiffany bracelet he'd bought her, but my grandmother's antique bracelet, the one I kept in my jewelry box, the one that wasn't his to give. That's when sadness crystallized completely into something else, something cold and purposeful. Tom had stolen more than just my present. He'd stolen my past by making every memory suspect, every happy moment potentially false. And he'd tried to steal my future by making me doubt myself, by gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing about me. I was an editor. My job was to see patterns, to find inconsistencies, to spot the flaws in a narrative and fix them. And Tom's story was falling apart. I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of controlled fury, meticulously planning. I met with a lawyer, a shark of a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. Her office was in Midtown, all glass and chrome, and intimidating success. She listened to my evidence, reviewed the financial records I'd gathered, and smiled a smile that reminded me of a predator scenting blood. "He's been moving money," she said, tapping her tablet screen where she'd pulled up bank records I didn't even know existed, setting up accounts in his name only, transferring assets, classic prep work for divorce. But here's the thing, he's been sloppy. And New York is an equitable distribution state. We can work with this. How sloppy? I asked. Sloppy enough that a good forensic accountant can trace everything. He's created a paper trail, probably thinking you'd never look. The arrogance is actually working in our favor. She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. How do you want to play this, Clara? Quick and quiet, or do you want to send a message? I thought about Tom bringing Sophie to the plaza, to our place. I thought about my grandmother's bracelet on her wrist. I thought about all the times he'd made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. I want to send a message. Patricia's smile widened. Good, because I have some ideas. I signed the retainer agreement with hands that didn't shake. This wasn't just about the money, though protecting my financial future mattered. This was about justice. This was about making sure Tom understood that actions have consequences, that people aren't disposable, that 20 years of marriage meant something even if he'd forgotten. Patricia walked me through the strategy, methodical and thorough. We would document everything, build an ironclad case, and when the time came, we would strike with precision. She explained community property laws, equitable distribution, and how Tom's attempts to hide assets would actually work against him in court. Men like your husband, she said, leaning forward with intensity. They think they're smarter than everyone else. They think their wives are too naive, too trusting, too dependent to fight back. That's their fatal flaw. They underestimate us. How many cases like mine have you handled? I asked. Dozens. And I win every single time. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Clara, I want you to understand something. What you're about to go through, it's going to be hard. There will be moments when you question yourself, when you wonder if fighting is worth it. But you need to remember why you're doing this. Not for revenge, although that's a valid emotion, but for justice. For recognition that your 20 years mattered. For ensuring that he can't just walk away and pretend you never existed. Her words settled into me like a vow. This wasn't about destroying Tom, though I wouldn't shed tears if I did. This was about refusing to be erased, to be dismissed, to become a footnote in his story of self-actualization. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home, smiling when he walked in, asking about his day, sleeping beside him at night, feeling the warmth of his body that had become a stranger's. Every word felt like swallowing glass, but I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. Tom had no idea he was living with a woman who had transformed from victim to strategist. I became an actress in my own life, playing the role of the oblivious wife while I systematically documented his betrayal and secured my future. I laughed at his jokes. I asked about his work. I pretended not to notice when he texted Sophie from the dinner table. I was building a case, brick by brick, and every moment of fake normalcy was another piece of evidence of his deception. The close call in his study had taught me to be more careful. I kept all my evidence on a secured cloud drive, accessed only from Lisa's apartment. I made copies of everything: financial records, texts, photos, emails. I documented every late night, every unexplained expense, every lie. I became a detective in my own marriage, and the case I was building was airtight. Patricia had connected me with a forensic accountant, a quiet woman named Rachel, who could find money hidden in places I didn't even know existed. She discovered accounts in the Cayman Islands, property purchased under shell companies, assets systematically moved out of joint accounts into Tom's name only. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, setting up his exit while making me feel crazy for questioning him. "He's been very busy," Rachel said during one of our meetings, her voice dry. "But not very clever. Everything is traceable. Every transfer, every hidden account, every attempt to shield assets. In New York, this is going to cost him dearly." One night in early December, Tom came home excited. "Great news," he said, pouring himself a scotch in the living room. "Richard wants to host a big Christmas dinner at his place this year, but I thought, why don't we do it here? Show off the townhouse. I've already invited everyone." My heart stuttered. Everyone? Family, business partners, the Hendersons from next door, maybe 30 people. It'll be perfect. He was already on his phone, probably texting Sophie. "You're okay with that, right?" I had two choices. I could say no, avoid the spectacle, handle the divorce quietly and privately. Or I could see the opportunity he was handing me. 30 witnesses, Tom's entire professional and personal world gathered in our home. The stage was set if I was brave enough to use it. "Of course," I heard myself say. "That sounds wonderful." He smiled, kissed my cheek absently, and walked away, already lost in his phone. He had no idea what he'd just done. No idea that he'd handed me the perfect venue for his public reckoning. Later that night, I called Patricia. "He wants to host Christmas dinner, 30 people, family, friends, business associates." There was a pause, then I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Clara, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I need to know if it's legal." "Legal? Yes. Advisable? That's another question. Public humiliation can backfire in divorce proceedings. Judges don't always appreciate dramatic gestures. But it's not illegal? No. Morally questionable, perhaps, but not illegal. You have every right to reveal the truth about your husband's affair. What you do with that right is up to you." Another pause. "Clara, are you sure about this? Once you go public, there's no taking it back. Your private pain becomes public knowledge. Everyone will have an opinion." "Let them," I said, and I meant it. "He humiliated me in private for months. It's time for the truth to come out." "All right then. Let's make sure you're protected. I'll prepare documentation showing that any public revelation was provoked by his decision to bring his mistress to a family gathering. If he's planning what I think he's planning, we need to be ready." The next 2 weeks were a performance worthy of Broadway. I planned the menu with our caterer, arranged for flowers, selected the wine. I bought a new dress, a deep emerald green that made me look powerful and pulled together. I played the perfect hostess, the devoted wife, the woman who had everything under control. Inside, I was counting down the hours until Christmas Day. I want you to understand something about revenge. It's not hot and impulsive. It's not screaming and throwing dishes. Real revenge is cold. It's calculated. It's served with a smile and a steady hand, and mine had been simmering for weeks, reducing down to its purest, most potent form. Patricia helped me prepare the presentation. We gathered the most damning evidence, the photos, the text messages, the financial records showing how Tom had been systematically moving our assets. We created a simple slideshow, nothing dramatic, just the facts presented clearly and undeniably. Truth doesn't need embellishment. Lisa set up the technology, connecting a hidden tablet to our television, showing me how to trigger the slideshow with a remote I could keep in my pocket. We did a dry run, making sure everything worked perfectly. No technical difficulties on the most important presentation of my life. The night before Christmas, I barely slept. I lay beside Tom, listening to him breathe, wondering if he was dreaming about Sophie, about his new life, about the future he'd planned without me. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been over the years. The hopeful bride who thought love conquered all. The supportive wife who put her husband's career first. The anxious woman who doubted her own sanity. And finally, this new version, the one who refused to be dismissed, erased, or forgotten. Christmas morning arrived bright and cold, the kind of perfect winter day that makes New York look like a snow globe. Our townhouse was transformed into a festive wonderland, garlands on the banisters, a towering tree in the living room, the scent of pine and cinnamon filling the air. The caterers arrived early, setting up stations in the kitchen, arranging serving platters, uncorking bottles of expensive wine. I dressed carefully, taking my time with makeup and hair. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was polished, composed, powerful. I looked like someone who had her life together, someone who couldn't be broken. Tom had no idea that underneath the emerald dress and perfect lipstick was a woman made of steel and fury. Guests started arriving around noon, bundled in expensive coats, carrying bottles of wine and hostess gifts. I greeted each one with a warm smile, took their coats, offered drinks, played the perfect hostess. Tom was in his element, playing the successful host, the loving husband, the man who had it all. He squeezed my shoulder as he passed, whispered, "You've outdone yourself, sweetheart." And I smiled back, saving my energy for what was coming. My parents arrived, looking older than I remembered, my mother's hands trembling slightly as she hugged me. Tom's mother came with his sister, both dressed in their finest, ready to show off their connection to success. Richard and James brought their wives, all of them part of the social circle that Tom valued so much. The Hendersons from next door, colleagues from Tom's office, friends we'd collected over 20 years of marriage. They filled our home with laughter and conversation, completely unaware that they were about to witness the detonation of a 20-year marriage. By 3 o'clock, everyone had arrived. The living room was packed with people, glasses of champagne in hand, nibbling on expensive hors d'oeuvres, admiring the decorations. Christmas music played softly in the background. It was perfect. It was exactly what Tom had wanted. I was in the kitchen, pretending to check on the roast, when Lisa texted me. "The slideshow is ready, connected to your TV. Just hit play when you're ready. You've got this, honey. Burn it down." My hands were steady as I typed back. "Thank you for everything. You deserve better than him. Show them who you really are." I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the living room. The remote was in my pocket, a small weight that felt like a weapon. Tom was holding court by the fireplace, telling some story about a difficult negotiation. Everyone was laughing, champagne glasses in hand, the picture of sophisticated holiday cheer. That's when the doorbell rang. Tom's face lit up. "Oh, perfect timing." He practically jogged to the door, and I knew. I knew before he even opened it. This was it. This was the moment he'd been planning, the grand gesture, the public claiming of his new relationship. He was going to introduce Sophie to our world on Christmas Day, in our home, in front of everyone who mattered. And I was going to let him. The room fell silent as Tom walked in with Sophie on his arm, exactly as I described at the beginning. Her red dress, his confident smile, the diamond bracelet catching the light. But now I noticed more. The way she hesitated in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. The way Tom's grip on her waist was possessive, claiming. The way he scanned the room, feeding on the shock and attention. My mother gasped. Tom's business partner's wife actually dropped her wine glass, red spreading across the white carpet like blood. Tom's mother made a sound like she'd been struck. The silence was complete, absolute, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Tom said, his voice carrying that practiced confidence. "This is Sophie. She's joining us for dinner." I could feel 30 pairs of eyes turning to me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for the tears, the screaming, the dramatic collapse. But I'd cried all my tears weeks ago. I'd done my screaming into pillows in empty rooms. Now I was simply ready. "Tom," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "What are you doing?" He laughed, pulling Sophie closer, his arrogance on full display. "Come on, Clara, lighten up. You don't know how to have fun anymore. You only live once, right?" There it was. The dismissal, the casual cruelty. The reduction of 20 years to an inconvenient obstacle to his pursuit of pleasure. And he'd said it in front of everyone, given me the gift of witnesses to his contempt. Sophie looked uncomfortable now, her confidence evaporating as she registered the horrified faces around her. She tried to pull away slightly, but Tom held her tighter. This was his moment, his grand declaration, and he wasn't going to let anyone ruin it, not even the woman he'd brought as his shield. "You're absolutely right, Tom," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You only live once, and I've decided it's time I started actually living." I walked to the television, picked up the remote that Lisa had connected to the cloud drive, and turned to face our guests. My hand was steady, my voice clear. This was it, the point of no return. "I'm sorry to hijack Christmas dinner," I said, addressing the room, "but I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about Tom's new commitment to living life to the fullest." Tom's face went pale. "Clara, what are you—" "For the past 6 months," I continued, my voice projecting clearly through the room, "my husband has been having an affair with Sophie here. Don't feel bad if you're shocked. I was too when I found out. But unlike Tom, I believe in honesty. So I thought we should all celebrate his new relationship together." I pressed play. The first image appeared on our 75-inch television, Tom and Sophie at a beach resort, his hands on her waist, her lips on his neck. The timestamp showed it was taken during a week. Tom told me he was at a conference in Chicago. The week he'd called me every night, telling me he loved me, telling me he missed me, while he was actually creating memories with someone else. Sophie made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Tom started toward me, but Richard stepped between us, his face a mask of fury. "Don't," Richard said quietly. "Don't make this worse." The images continued, more photos from their romantic getaway. Text messages appeared on screen, Tom's words to Sophie about how boring I was, how he couldn't wait to be free, how he'd been setting up separate accounts to protect his money from me in the divorce. Financial records showed systematic asset transfers. Money moved into accounts with only his name, properties purchased without my knowledge. "That's enough," Tom said, his voice tight with rage. "Turn it off." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Isn't this what you wanted? To live openly? To not hide anymore? I'm just helping you along." His mother stood up, her face white, one hand pressed to her throat. "Thomas, what have you done?" "It's not," he started. But what could he say? The evidence was there, undeniable, time-stamped and documented. His carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. I advanced to the next slide, copies of emails where Tom discussed divorce strategy with Sophie, planning how to minimize what I'd get, how to paint me as mentally unstable, how to turn our friends against me. There was a message where he called me the obstacle, another where he joked about my career, dismissing 20 years of my work as playing with books. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, could hear someone's phone buzzing with an ignored call, could hear the caterers frozen in the kitchen doorway. "You wanted fun, Tom?" I said, my voice sharp as broken glass. "Here's your highlight reel." Tom lunged for the remote, but I'd already backed away, the slideshow continuing its devastating reveal. His business partner Richard was staring at him with undisguised disgust. James had pulled out his phone, probably already calculating how this scandal would affect their deals. Tom's mother was crying, one hand pressed to her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. And Sophie, poor Sophie, was beginning to understand that she wasn't the fairy tale ending Tom had promised her. She was just the latest chapter in a story that was ending badly for everyone involved. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable, a woman who'd believed a married man's promises and was now paying the price for that naivety. "You're crazy," Tom hissed at me, his charm completely evaporated, revealing the ugliness underneath. "You're insane." "No," I said calmly, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I'm done. There's a difference." I picked up my purse from the hall table where I'd placed it that morning in preparation for this moment. Inside was my phone, my wallet, and the keys to my lawyer's office. Everything I needed to walk away. "The divorce papers are with my lawyer," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. "You'll be served tomorrow. I'm keeping the townhouse as specified in our prenuptial agreement that you violated by committing adultery. You'll find that the accounts you've been hiding are already frozen. Thank you to some very thorough legal work by Patricia Chen." I paused, letting that sink in. "And Tom, you were right about one thing. You only live once. I'm glad I'm finally starting to live mine." The cold December air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I realized I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices, accusations, questions, the sound of a life imploding. Richard's voice raised in anger, Tom's mother sobbing, someone trying to comfort Sophie who was also crying now. But I kept walking, my heels clicking on the icy sidewalk, free. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked, letting my feet carry me away from the townhouse, away from the wreckage of my marriage, away from the woman I used to be. The city was quiet on Christmas Day. Most people inside with their families, and I had the sidewalks largely to myself. Snow had started to fall, soft flakes that caught in my hair and melted on my cheeks, mixing with tears I hadn't realized I was crying. But these were different tears, not tears of sadness or betrayal, but tears of release, of liberation, of finally telling the truth after months of living in lies. I walked for hours, past decorated storefronts and lit-up trees, past couples holding hands and families bundled together. I walked until my feet hurt and my nose was numb from cold. And then I found myself standing outside Lisa's apartment building in Chelsea. She buzzed me up without question. When she opened her door and saw me standing there, mascara running, emerald dress covered in melting snow, she simply pulled me inside and wrapped me in a hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." "I did it," I agreed, and started laughing through my tears. I actually did it. The aftermath played out like dominoes falling. Tom's business partners distanced themselves immediately, concerned about the optics of being associated with someone who displayed such poor judgment and moral character. The deals he'd been working on fell through as investors got cold feet. His reputation in Manhattan real estate circles, built over 2 decades, crumbled in a matter of weeks. The story spread through our social circles like wildfire. I didn't have to say anything. The guests at that Christmas dinner did all the talking for me. Within 48 hours, everyone we knew had heard about Tom bringing his mistress to our holiday gathering, about the slideshow of evidence, about his systematic betrayal and financial manipulation. My phone exploded with messages. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out, some offering support, others clearly fishing for gossip. I ignored most of them. The people who mattered, the ones who knew me beyond my role as Tom's wife, those were the ones I responded to. My sister called, crying, "Clara, I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have asked more questions." "There's nothing you could have done," I told her. "He fooled all of us. That was his specialty. My mother was less emotional, more practical. What do you need? Money? A place to stay? Should I come to New York?" "I'm okay, Mom, really. I have good lawyers, I have the house, and I have myself. That's enough." Richard called me 3 days after Christmas. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that James and I are dissolving our partnership with Tom. What he did, how he treated you, it's unacceptable. We can't be associated with that kind of behavior." "Thank you, Richard. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. My wife, she knew something was off, but we didn't realize." He trailed off. "You deserved better, Clara. You always did." There was a pause, then he continued. "The Henderson project, the one he told you was contingent on his conference in Chicago. We found out he wasn't even there. He never met with those clients. The whole thing was a lie to cover for his trip with Sophie. We've been going through our books, and there are discrepancies everywhere. He's been using company funds for personal expenses. We're considering pressing charges." "Do what you need to do," I said. "I'm done protecting him." Sophie left him after discovering that the promises he'd made to her, the penthouse apartment, the trips to Europe, the life of luxury, were all built on money that was legally mine. Turns out Tom had been spending our assets to fund their affair, buying her gifts and booking hotels with money from our joint accounts. Another gift from my lawyers. She disappeared from his life as quickly as she'd entered it, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She sent me a letter, weeks later. A handwritten note on expensive stationery that arrived at the townhouse. I almost threw it away without reading, but curiosity won. "Dear Clara," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't deserve your sympathy, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Tom told me you were separated, that the divorce was already in progress, that you'd moved on. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I need you to know that I didn't realize, I didn't understand, until it was too late. You're strong in ways I'm only beginning to comprehend. I hope someday to have half your courage. Sophie." I read it twice, then filed it away with the other documents from that chapter of my life. She'd been lied to, manipulated, used as a weapon against me. But she'd also made her choices, believed what she wanted to believe, participated in the destruction of my marriage. My sympathy only extended so far. The people who'd enabled him, who'd covered for his absences, who'd looked the other way, found themselves facing social consequences too. Richard's wife, who'd known about Sophie for months and said nothing, was frozen out of our social circle. The men who'd provided Tom with alibis discovered that Manhattan society has a long memory for betrayal. Tom tried everything. He called me dozens of times, messages swinging wildly between rage and pleading. "You destroyed me," he screamed in one voicemail. "How could you do this to me?" In another, his voice was soft, cajoling. "Clara, baby, we can work this out. Everyone makes mistakes. I still love you. Please, let's talk about this." The audacity of it would have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. He wanted to reconcile? After everything. He still thought he could charm his way back, manipulate me into taking him back, into saving him from the consequences of his own actions. He showed up at the townhouse drunk one night, pounding on the door, shouting about how I'd ruined his life. I watched through the security camera as he raged on the sidewalk, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair disheveled, all his polished charm stripped away to reveal the entitled, self-centered core underneath. I called the police. When they arrived, I provided them with copies of his threatening messages, the evidence of his increasingly erratic behavior. I got a restraining order the next day. And when they escorted him away from my home, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where 20 years of love used to live. But here's the thing about revenge. Once it's done, you're left with just yourself and the ruins of what used to be. And I discovered something surprising. The satisfaction of Tom's downfall was brief, fleeting, ultimately hollow. What remained was the hard work of rebuilding, of figuring out who I was without him, without the identity of wife that I'd worn for 2 decades. The legal settlement took 4 months to finalize. Patricia was as good as her reputation. I kept the townhouse, received a significant portion of his assets, and walked away with enough money to never worry again. Tom moved into a small apartment in Jersey City, his career in shambles, his reputation destroyed. Some people called me vindictive. Others called me a hero. I didn't care about either label. What mattered was that I was free. The first few months were strange. I'd wake up in our bed, still expecting to find Tom there, still reaching for him in the middle of the night before remembering. The townhouse felt too big, too quiet, filled with ghosts of dinners and arguments and lazy Sunday mornings that would never happen again. I thought about selling it, starting fresh somewhere new. Every room held memories. The kitchen where I'd made his coffee every morning. The living room where we'd hosted parties, played host to the life we'd built. The bedroom where we'd made love, fought, reconciled, drifted apart without even realizing it. Walking through the townhouse was like walking through a museum of a life that no longer existed. There were mornings when the loneliness was so profound it felt physical, like a weight on my chest making it hard to breathe. I'd lie in bed listening to the sounds of the building waking up around me. Mrs. Chen's tea kettle whistling, the Johnsons' kids getting ready for school, the elevator machinery humming. Life was going on, normal and unchanged, while I was learning how to exist alone. I developed new routines to fill the space Tom had left. I started taking my coffee on the balcony, watching the sunrise over the Manhattan skyline. I discovered podcasts about everything from true crime to Italian cooking. I learned to cook for one, something I'd never done in my adult life. Dinner parties for 30, yes. A simple meal for myself? That was new territory. The hardest part was the silence. After 20 years of living with someone, of constant companionship, even if it had become hollow toward the end, being alone was jarring. I'd catch myself about to tell Tom about something funny that happened at work, or turning to share a comment about the news, only to remember he wasn't there. I filled the silence with music, with audiobooks, with the television playing in the background. Anything to avoid the echoing quiet that made me think too much, feel too much, remember too much. But then I realized, why should I leave? This was my home. I'd earned it, not just in the divorce settlement, but through 20 years of creating a life here. So instead, I redecorated. I painted over the beige walls Tom had insisted on, choosing deep blues and warm terracottas, colors that made me happy. I donated his furniture and bought pieces I actually loved, comfortable and eclectic instead of status symbols. I turned his study into a reading room lined with bookshelves for my ever-growing collection. I reclaimed every inch of space he'd occupied, made it mine again. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into manuscripts, discovered new authors, championed books that moved me. The manuscript about the cheating husband that I'd been reading when Tom's affair started, I rejected it. Too close, too raw. Instead, I found myself drawn to stories of survival, of women reinventing themselves, of resilience in the face of betrayal. I found a memoir by a woman who'd left an abusive marriage and started a bakery in Portland. I acquired a novel about a divorcee who sailed around the world solo. I championed a debut author who wrote about finding yourself after losing everything you thought defined you. These stories spoke to me in ways that literature never had before. I wasn't just editing them, I was living them. My colleagues noticed the change. In meetings, I was more assertive, more willing to fight for the projects I believed in. I stopped deferring to others, stopped making myself smaller to avoid conflict. I had opinions, and I voiced them. I had standards, and I maintained them. For the first time in my professional life, I wasn't worried about how my behavior might reflect on Tom's business relationships or social connections. One afternoon, I was in a contentious editorial meeting, arguing passionately for a manuscript that others wanted to pass on. It was a tough, unflinching look at marriage and betrayal, beautifully written but commercially risky. "This is the kind of book Preston Publishing should be known for," I said, my voice steady and strong. "Yes, it's challenging. Yes, it might not sell as well as another celebrity memoir, but it matters. It tells a truth that needs to be told. And if we're not willing to take risks on meaningful literature, what's the point of what we do?" The room was silent. Then my boss, Margaret, smiled. "You're absolutely right. Let's make an offer." After the meeting, she pulled me aside. "Clara, you're on fire lately," she said. 3 acquisitions in 2 months. And that debut novel you championed is getting incredible buzz. What's your secret?" I smiled. "I'm just finally clear about what matters. Whatever it is, keep it up. I'm recommending you for executive editor. The board meeting is next month, but I wanted you to know. You've earned this." The promotion to executive editor came with a raise, a bigger office, and the recognition I'd been quietly craving for years. For the first time, I felt proud of my own accomplishments, separate from being Tom's wife. I was Clara Reeves again, not Clara Henderson. I'd taken back my maiden name, reclaiming that part of my identity that had been subsumed by marriage. And slowly, carefully, I started to remember who Clara was before she became Mrs. Tom Henderson. I took a painting class at the Art Students League and discovered I had a decent eye for color and composition. My paintings were abstract, emotional, all the feelings I'd suppressed for years splashed across canvas in bold strokes. My instructor called them powerful. I called them therapy. The first painting I completed was all reds and blacks, angry slashes of color that represented the rage I'd felt discovering Tom's betrayal. The second was softer, blues and grays, the sadness and grief of lost years. By the 5th painting, I was using yellows and golds, bright, hopeful colors that surprised me. I hadn't realized I was ready for hope yet. "You're processing," my instructor, an older woman named Diane, who'd been through 2 divorces herself, told me. "Art is cheaper than therapy, and you get something beautiful at the end." "I'm not sure these are beautiful," I said, looking at my canvas covered in chaotic brushstrokes. "They're honest. That's more valuable than beauty." I joined a book club with women who became real friends, not just social acquaintances. We met every other Thursday, drinking wine and dissecting literature and sharing our lives. They knew about Tom, about the divorce, but they valued me for who I was now, not who I'd been. With them, I could be funny, sharp, opinionated without worrying about how it reflected on my husband's reputation. There was Jennifer, a cardiac surgeon who'd never married and had no regrets about it. Maya, a divorced mother of 3 who was dating again at 50 and sharing hilarious stories about modern dating apps. Yuki, whose husband had died of cancer 5 years ago and who was slowly learning to live again. And Ruth, married for 30 years to the same man and secure enough to acknowledge that marriage was hard work, not a fairy tale. They became my chosen family, these women who'd lived and lost and survived. We didn't just talk about books, we talked about everything. Life, work, relationships, fears, dreams, failures, triumphs. With them, I could be wholly myself without apology or explanation. I started running in Central Park, feeling my body grow stronger, more capable. Every mile was a reclamation, every bead of sweat proof that I was alive, vital, more than the discarded wife Tom had tried to make me. I ran in all weather, learning the rhythms of the park, the other regulars, the changing seasons. Sometimes I ran until my legs ached and my lungs burned, outrunning the memories, outrunning the anger, outrunning the woman I used to be. I traveled alone for the first time in my adult life. Spent 2 weeks in Italy doing absolutely nothing but reading and eating and existing without having to consider anyone else's preferences. I stayed in a small hotel in Florence, wandered the Uffizi without rushing, ate gelato for dinner when I felt like it. I watched sunsets over the Arno and felt something in my chest loosen, some tight knot of anxiety that had been there so long I'd forgotten it wasn't natural. The first few days in Italy were disorienting. I kept looking around for Tom, kept almost asking him what he wanted to do, where he wanted to eat. I'd catch myself mid-thought and realize, with a jolt of liberation, that I could do whatever I wanted. I could spend 3 hours in a museum if I felt like it. I could skip the famous tourist sites and just sit in a cafe watching people. I could eat pasta for every meal if that's what appealed to me. One evening, I sat at a small trattoria in Trastevere, watching couples walk by hand in hand. An elderly man at the next table noticed me observing and smiled. "Prima volta a Roma?" he asked in Italian. "Yes, first time," I replied in English, my Italian limited to menu items. "Alone?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, alone." He raised his wine glass to me. The best way to discover a city. When you are alone, you pay attention. You see things. When you are with someone, you see only them. He paused, then added, "Or you see nothing at all." His words stayed with me. I had spent 20 years seeing nothing at all. Not the city I lived in, not the work I loved, not even myself. I'd been so focused on being Tom's wife, on maintaining our life, our image, our status, that I'd disappeared. But here in Italy, eating pasta carbonara at a table for one, I was visible again. To myself, if no one else. I even eventually started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Coffee with a colleague from work, a kind man who published literary fiction and made me laugh. Dinner with a friend of a friend, a professor who loved books as much as I did. Learning how to trust again, learning that not all men are Tom, learning that I deserved better than what I'd settled for. The first date was terrifying. I spent an hour trying on different outfits, feeling ridiculous. I was 42 years old, not a teenager going to prom. But dating after 20 years of marriage felt like learning a foreign language. All the rules had changed. Apps, texting etiquette, who pays, how many dates before you sleep with someone. It was a whole new world. "Just be yourself," Lisa advised when I called her in a panic. "And if he doesn't like the real you, then he's not worth your time." The real me. I was still figuring out who that was. There was one man, James, a lawyer who'd been through his own divorce. We dated for several months, careful with each other's bruised hearts. He was kind, patient, interested in my opinions. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered small details I mentioned in passing. He was, in many ways, everything Tom hadn't been. But when he suggested moving in together, I realized I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. And that was okay. I'd rather be alone and whole than coupled and diminished. "I really like you," I told him over dinner one evening. "But I need to be on my own right now. I need to know that I can stand alone before I try to stand with someone else." He was disappointed, but he understood. "You know where to find me if you change your mind," he said, kissing my cheek goodbye. "You're worth waiting for, Clara." It was kind of him to say, and maybe it was even true. But I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was living, fully and completely, in a way I never had before. Now, let me share what I've learned through all of this, because if my pain can help even one person avoid the same trap, then maybe it meant something. The signs of manipulation were there from the beginning. I just didn't know how to read them. The way Tom would dismiss my concerns as overreaction. How he'd make me doubt my own perceptions and memories. The slow erosion of my confidence, so gradual I didn't notice until I'd become a shadow of myself. That's gaslighting, and it's insidious because it makes you complicit in your own diminishment. Looking back now with clear eyes, I can see the pattern that I missed while living it. Tom didn't start out as a villain, or maybe he did, and I was too naive to see it. But the control started early and small. Comments about my friends. Do you really want to spend time with Sarah? She's kind of negative, don't you think? Suggestions about my career. You don't need to work so hard, sweetheart. We're financially comfortable. Why stress yourself? Opinions about my appearance. That dress is a bit young for you, don't you think? Each comment, taken alone, seemed harmless, concerned even, loving. But collectively, over years, they added up to a systematic dismantling of my autonomy, my confidence, my sense of self. I stopped seeing friends he didn't approve of. I turned down promotions because he suggested I was spreading myself too thin. I dressed to please him instead of myself. It starts small. A comment here about your outfit being unflattering. A suggestion that you're being too sensitive when you express hurt. A dismissal of your memory of an event. That's not how it happened, you're remembering wrong. Over time, these small invalidations accumulate until you no longer trust your own perceptions, your own feelings, your own reality. And the truly insidious part? I defended him. When friends gently suggested that Tom was controlling, I'd explain that he just cared about me, that he wanted what was best for us. I made excuses for behavior that, in anyone else's relationship, I would have recognized as toxic. Because when you're inside it, when you love someone, when you've built your entire life around them, you can't see the cage they're building around you. You just notice that the world keeps getting smaller. Financial abuse was another pattern I missed. Tom controlled our money, made all the major decisions, positioned himself as the provider while making me feel like my income was merely supplementary, fun money for my little hobbies. He used money to maintain power, and when he decided to leave, he tried to use it to leave me with nothing. If you're in a relationship where you don't have equal access to financial information, where you don't know about accounts or assets, where you have to ask permission to spend money, that's a red flag. The narcissism was probably the hardest to recognize because Tom was so charming, so successful, so confident. But healthy confidence doesn't require diminishing others. It doesn't need constant validation. It doesn't lack empathy for people it claims to love. Tom's inability to take responsibility, his need to blame me for his choices, his belief that he deserved whatever he wanted regardless of who it hurt, those were all signs I should have seen sooner. But here's what I want you to understand. Recognizing these patterns doesn't mean you caused them. Tom's choices were his own. His betrayal was his decision. His cruelty was his character flaw, not my failure. For so long, I blamed myself for not being enough, not being fun enough, young enough, interesting enough. But the truth is, there is no enough for someone who's fundamentally unable to be satisfied with what they have. If you're listening to this and seeing your own relationship reflected back, please hear me. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve a partner who sees you as an equal, not a convenience to be managed or an obstacle to be overcome. And if you're not getting those things, if you find yourself constantly questioning your sanity, walking on eggshells, making yourself smaller to avoid conflict, then it's time to start planning your exit. Get your own bank account, even if you have to hide it. Make copies of financial records, everything, bank statements, tax returns, property deeds, investment accounts. Document the abuse, even if it's just emotional. Keep a journal, save text messages, record conversations if your state allows it. Build a support network of people who will tell you the truth, not what you want to hear. And most importantly, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Never let anyone dim your light. Not for love, not for security, not for the comfortable lie of a perfect life. I spent 20 years making myself dimmer so Tom could shine brighter, and I'll never get those years back. But I refuse to waste one more day living half a life. I'm sitting in my reading room right now, surrounded by books, sunlight streaming through windows I chose. In a home that belongs fully to me, I'm 42 years old, starting over, and that's not a tragedy. It's a liberation. I don't know what the next chapter holds. Maybe another relationship, maybe not. Maybe a move to a new city, maybe deeper roots here in New York. Maybe something I haven't even imagined yet. Some days are harder than others. There are still mornings when I wake up, and the first thought is about Tom, about what we lost, about all those wasted years. There are moments when I see a couple my age, happy and in love, and I feel a pang of something that might be regret or might just be grief for the life I thought I'd have. But those moments are becoming fewer, farther between. They're being replaced by mornings when I wake up excited about my day, about the manuscript I'm editing, about dinner with my book club, about a weekend to myself with no obligations to anyone but me. The pain is fading, slowly but surely, like a bruise healing from the inside out. I've learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I feel strong and empowered and proud of what I've overcome. Other days I feel fragile and uncertain and terrified of the future. Both are valid. Both are part of the process. The key is not getting stuck in either extreme, but allowing myself to feel it all while still moving forward. But for the first time in 20 years, the story of my life is mine to write. No co-author looking over my shoulder, no one editing my narrative to suit their needs. Just me, a blank page, and unlimited possibility. "You only live once," Tom said. He meant it as justification for selfishness, for betrayal, for taking whatever he wanted regardless of the cost. But he accidentally handed me the truth. You only live once. So I'm finally starting to live, really live, with my whole heart and my full self. Before I close this story, I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? What time is it in your part of the world? Are you going through something similar, or have you survived your own betrayal? Drop a comment and let me know. Hit that like button if you think Clara made the right choice. And tell me, honestly, what would you have done in my position? Would you have exposed Tom publicly or handled it differently? Your perspective matters, and sharing our stories helps others feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, there are 2 other videos on screen right now that I think you'll find valuable. One about recognizing financial abuse in relationships, and another about rebuilding your life after divorce. Both topics I've become unexpectedly well-versed in. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Every week I'll be sharing more stories like this, real experiences from real people, the messy, complicated, sometimes triumphant reality of navigating relationships and finding yourself again after loss. Until the next story, take care of your heart. It's the only one you've got, and it deserves to be treated with respect and tenderness, by others and especially by yourself. Guard it wisely, but don't be afraid to use it fully. That's where real life happens, in the brave, terrifying, beautiful act of staying open even after you've been broken. Choose yourself, always. You're worth it. This is Clara, signing off from New York City, where the snow is starting to fall and a whole new year is waiting. Make it count. Make every single moment count.